A city can survive fire, it can survive plague, it can survive siege. For 8 centuries, this city survived everything the world sent against it. Then it was broken by those who called themselves its brothers. It came back, as it always came back. What followed was 250 years of Byzantine twilight, 5 centuries of Ottoman magnificence, and the birth of a modern city that holds all of it inside its stones. This is the second half of the story, the city that refused to end. In 1261, a Byzantine general retook Constantinople almost by accident. Michael VIII entered on foot through the Golden Gate. He wept. Hagia Sophia was restored to orthodoxy. The icons came back to the walls. The city that returned to Byzantine hands was a shadow of what had been lost. The population had fallen from 500,000 to 100,000. Entire districts were abandoned. But the Palaiologians funded art. The last century of Byzantium was one of its most creative. The mosaics of the Chora church were made in this final Byzantine flourishing. These images point forward to the Italian Renaissance as much as backward to ancient Greece. Byzantine scholars carried Greek manuscripts to Italy. They taught Greek in Florence. They brought Plato to the West. The Renaissance would not have happened as it did without Constantinople scholars and their books. In Anatolia, a new power was growing, the Ottomans. By 1400, the Ottoman Empire surrounded Constantinople on all sides. The city was a walled island in an Ottoman sea. The emperor traveled to Italy personally, to Florence, to Venice, begging for crusade. None came. At the Council of Florence, the Byzantine Church agreed to union with Rome. In exchange, nothing. When the emperor returned to Constantinople, his own people refused the union. They would rather the turban than the papal tiara. Sultan Murad II besieged the city in 1422 and withdrew, a reprieve. In 1451, a 21-year-old sultan came to power. His first obsession was Constantinople. He had studied the city since childhood. He had memorized its walls. He knew every failed siege in its history. Within months of becoming sultan, Mehmed built a fortress on the Bosphorus that cut the city off from the Black Sea. He called it the Throat Cutter. He controlled the Strait. The city could no longer be supplied from the north. The last emperor was Constantine XI Palaiologos. He had 7,000 soldiers to defend 20 miles of walls. He knew the city could not be saved. He stayed anyway. On April 2, 1453, Mehmed II arrived before Constantinople with the largest army in Ottoman history. He brought cannon, including one built by a Hungarian engineer, 12 feet long. It could throw a 600-pound stone ball. On April 6th, the cannon fired for the first time against the Theodosian Walls. The Byzantines worked through the night to rebuild each breach. They filled the gaps with rubble and wood. The chain across the Golden Horn held. The Ottoman fleet could not enter. Mehmed had 70 ships dragged on wooden sledges over the hill and into the Golden Horn. The Byzantines woke to find enemy ships already inside the harbor. Constantine called a final council. There were no options left, only choices about how to die. On the night of May 28th, the entire city crowded into Hagia Sophia for what everyone knew might be the last service. Byzantine sources say it was the most beautiful liturgy the city had ever witnessed. The emperor asked forgiveness from all those he had wronged. Then he mounted his horse and rode to the walls. At 2 in the morning of May 29th, the final assault began. The first waves were repulsed. Then a janissary found a small gate left unbolted in the inner wall. It had taken 53
I
days.
commend you to the grace of
Constantine tore off his imperial insignia and charged into the melee. He was never seen again. His body was never identified with certainty. The city fell on the morning of May 29, 1453. Those who had taken shelter in Hagia Sophia waited. Then the doors opened. The building stood. The mosaics looked down on the soldiers who had entered. Sultan Mehmed II rode into the city at midday. Before entering Hagia Sophia, he bent down, took a handful of earth, and poured it over his turban. He stood beneath the dome alone. He said, "A spider weaves its web in the palace of the Caesars." He prayed inside the church. It became a mosque. The call to prayer rang out over Constantinople for the first time. The Byzantine Empire was over. 1,123 years after Constantine had dedicated the city. The scholars who had not already fled now left. Their manuscripts went to Venice, Florence, Rome. A Greek monk who witnessed the fall wrote, "The sun hid its face. Nothing has ever been so terrible." But Mehmed did not see ruins. He saw his capital. He ordered the city repopulated. Greeks were invited back. Armenians brought in. Jews welcomed. He called it Constantiniye. He did not change the name. He wanted to inherit the legacy, not erase it. He called himself Kaiser-i-Rum, Caesar of Rome. He was not ending an empire. He was continuing one. The city endured, as it always had. The walls that had protected the city for 1,000 years still stood. Hagia Sophia stood. It always stands. Life continued, as it does. The Strait did not mourn. The boats crossed. A new age was beginning, the same city, a different sky. Constantinople was over. Istanbul was beginning. The city that had been the capital of Christendom became the capital of the greatest Islamic empire in history. Mehmed built his palace on the tip of the promontory, the same point where Byzantium had landed 2,000 years before. The Topkapi Palace was not one building. It was a city within the city, home to 10,000 people. Every tile was a choice, every courtyard a decision about the relationship between man and God. Mehmed collected the library of the Byzantine emperors. He spoke Greek. He read Plutarch. His court was intentionally cosmopolitan. The empire, like the city, would belong to everyone who could serve it. The Greek Orthodox Patriarch was restored. The Greeks of Istanbul were given their religion and their community. They survived under Ottoman rule with more autonomy than many Christian minorities in Europe enjoyed. When Spain expelled its Jews in 1492, the Ottoman Sultan welcomed them. They said, "Ferdinand of Spain is called a wise king, who by impoverishing himself enriches my kingdom." The Grand Bazaar began as a small, covered market under Mehmed. By the 16th century, it had 4,000 shops, silk from China, spices from India, carpets from Persia. Everything passed through the Bazaar of Constantinople. The trade of the Silk Road still ran through the city. The Ottomans inherited not just the city, but its position. Under Selim I, the empire doubled. Egypt, Syria, Arabia. The holy cities of Mecca and Medina came under Ottoman protection. Selim became caliph, the leader of all Sunni Muslims. Constantinople became the spiritual capital of Islam. In 1520, Suleiman became sultan. His reign would last 46 years. His name would pass into legend. He was called the Magnificent in Europe. His own people called him the Lawgiver. Suleiman's armies reached the gates of Vienna. The Ottoman Empire was the largest power on earth. At its height under Suleiman, the empire stretched across 3 continents and governed 15 million people. Suleiman commissioned the architect Sinan to build a mosque that would surpass Hagia Sophia. Sinan studied Hagia Sophia for 20 years before he built the Suleymaniye. The mosque complex fed the poor, educated scholars, healed the sick. It was a statement about what an empire should be. Sinan lived to 99. He designed over 300 buildings. He defined the skyline of Istanbul. The city grew a new profile: Byzantine dome and Ottoman minaret side by side, competing to reach the sky. Suleiman's closest companion was Ibrahim Pasha, a Greek Christian who had been taken as a slave. He had Ibrahim strangled at dawn. The empire demanded loyalty. Friendship was secondary. His wife was a Ukrainian slave named Roxolana. She maneuvered the succession to favor her son. The harem was not simply a prison. It was the empire's heart of politics. Suleiman died in his tent in Hungary in 1566. His physicians kept his death secret for 3 days until his heir could be secured. His body was carried back to Istanbul as if he were merely sleeping. When the city learned, it mourned for 40 days. He is buried beside the mosque he built, beside Roxolana. The city in the second half of the 16th century was the richest and most populous in Europe. Ottoman craftsmen produced objects of extraordinary beauty: Iznik tiles, calligraphy, illuminated Qurans. The palace fed 10,000 people daily. Its kitchens were the largest in the world. Deep within the palace, the mantle and sword of the prophet were kept. The Sultan was their guardian. At night, the minarets were lit with oil lamps. The city was visible from 20 miles at sea. Every evening, a city of 1,000,000 lights. The Bosphorus was the city's artery. A boat crossed from Europe to Asia every few minutes. The Bosphorus supplied fish to 1,000,000 people. The city ate from the strait that defined it. Every major power kept an ambassador in Istanbul. The city was the fulcrum of European and Asian diplomacy. To receive a robe of honor from the Sultan was among the highest distinctions a foreign official could receive. Istanbul's medrese schools educated the empire's elite: astronomy, mathematics, law, theology. Ottoman astronomers calculated the exact time of prayer 5 times a day for 1,000 cities. The Ottoman hospital system was among the most advanced in the world. Istanbul in 1600 was the largest city in Europe, perhaps 800,000 people. 5 times a day the city paused. Sultan Ahmed began the Blue Mosque in 1609. He gave it 6 minarets, one for each finger of the divine prayer, 20,000 hand-painted tiles. The interior is all blue and light and geometry. The hippodrome where Byzantine emperors had watched chariot races became a plaza for Ottoman Istanbul. The serpent column from Delphi still stood in the hippodrome. Constantinople had collected time. An Egyptian obelisk carved for Thutmose III, 14 centuries before Christ, still stands in the square today. No city in the world was more diverse. No city held more contradictions in less space. The Armenians had been in Constantinople for centuries. They were the goldsmiths, the financiers, the architects of the empire. Persian literature, Arabic philosophy, Greek logic. Ottoman Istanbul contained them all. The skyline of Istanbul was the most recognizable on earth. The Golden Horn at evening, the city never entirely quiet. The Janissaries were the backbone of Ottoman military power, recruited as children from Christian families, converted, trained, devoted. The Devshirme system, boys taken from their families, made into soldiers, rewarded with power. Some rose to be grand viziers, but the world was changing. Vasco da Gama had found a sea route to India. The Silk Road was beginning to lose its traffic. The Ottoman Empire had been enriched by controlling the trade routes. Now those routes were being bypassed. Istanbul would not lose its wealth overnight. but the shift had begun. The 17th century would test the empire as the 16th had enriched it. The greatest city on earth looked at its reflection and waited. The 17th century began with rebellion. The Janissaries, once the empire's strength, had become its problem. When the Janissaries overturned their cauldrons, it meant, we refuse to eat at the Sultan's table. We refuse to serve. Sultans were deposed, strangled, replaced. Between 1617 and 1623, 4 sultans sat on the throne. In 1683, the empire made its last great military bid for Europe. 300,000 soldiers besieged Vienna. The Polish king John Sobieski led the largest cavalry charge in history. The Ottomans retreated. After Vienna, the Ottoman Empire never again advanced in Europe. The contraction had begun. But Istanbul remained Istanbul. The city barely noticed the distant defeats. The coffee house was invented in Istanbul. By the 17th century, there were thousands across the empire. Coffee spread from Istanbul to Vienna to Paris to London. The coffee house as a space for public debate, born here, the Tulip era. For 12 years, the empire rested from war and devoted itself to pleasure. The tulip was the symbol of perfection in Ottoman culture. From Istanbul, tulip mania spread to Holland. The first Ottoman printing press was established in 1727, 270 years after Gutenberg. 23 books were printed in the first decade. The scribal class resisted. Progress was slow. In 1821, the Greeks rose against Ottoman rule. The Ottoman response was brutal. Tens of thousands killed in reprisals. Greece became independent in 1832, the first piece of the Ottoman European territory to go. The Tanzimat reforms began in 1839. A new Ottoman constitution, equality for all religious communities. The empire attempted to reinvent itself as a modern state, as a place where religion did not determine your rights. The telegraph arrived in 1855. Istanbul was connected to London, Paris, Vienna by wire. The Orient Express arrived in Istanbul in 1888. Istanbul became the eastern terminus of European civilization. The Orient Express brought Europe to Istanbul's doorstep. The world was becoming smaller. The European quarter of Istanbul looked like Vienna or Paris. 2 cities overlapping in one place. The Galata Bridge connected the old city to the new. Everyone crossed it. Everyone was equal on its boards. The Crimean War of 1853 brought British and French soldiers to Istanbul. The empire had become a pawn of European power. Florence Nightingale ran her hospital here. From the windows, she watched the city. In 1876, Ottoman forces massacred Bulgarian civilians. The European press was outraged. Russia declared war. Its armies reached the suburb of San Stefano within sight of the city. Europe intervened. The Congress of Berlin in 1878 reversed most of Russia's gains, but the empire lost more territory. Sultan Abdulhamid II reigned for 33 years. He was brilliant, paranoid, and utterly alone. He governed by telegraph. Every governor reported directly to him. He trusted no one. The Armenians of the empire numbered over 2 million. They had been here since before the Ottomans. In the 1890s, massacres of Armenians began. 200,000 died. The world barely responded. A new generation of reformers, the Young Turks, organized underground. In 1908, the Young Turks forced the restoration of the Constitution. Crowds celebrated in the streets. For a brief moment, all the communities of Istanbul embraced each other in the streets, Ottoman citizens, not subjects. It did not last. The Balkan Wars stripped the empire of nearly all its remaining European territory in 2 years. Hundreds of thousands of Muslim refugees arrived in Istanbul. The city absorbed them. The empire entered World War I on Germany's side. It was a gamble that would end everything. At Gallipoli in 1915, the Ottomans held off a massive Allied invasion. A young officer named Mustafa Kemal commanded the defense of Gallipoli. He told his men, "I do not order you to attack. I order you to die." In 1915, the Young Turk government ordered the deportation of the Armenian population. More than 1 million Armenians died. The ancient Armenian community of Istanbul was largely destroyed. In November 1918, Allied warships sailed through the Bosphorus. Istanbul was occupied. British, French, Greek, Italian, all occupying the city that had been the seat of empire for 5 centuries. Mustafa Kemal left Istanbul for Anatolia. He would fight for 3 more years, the Turkish War of Independence, 3 years of battle against Greeks, Armenians, and Allied forces. The Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 recognized the Turkish Republic. 1.5 million Greeks left Anatolia. 500,000 Muslims left Greece. Communities that had coexisted for centuries were separated by a stroke of an international pen. On October 29, 1923, Mustafa Kemal declared the Republic of Turkey. He moved the capital to Ankara. Istanbul was no longer the center of power. For the first time in 16 centuries, this city was not a capital. In 1934, Ataturk converted Hagia Sophia from a mosque to a museum. The mosaics were uncovered. Beneath the plaster, Justinian's mosaics had been waiting. 500 years of Ottoman plaster removed in months. The city learned a new alphabet, new clothes, a new legal system, a new way of being Turkish. In September 1955, organized mobs attacked the Greek and Armenian communities. 90% of Istanbul's Greeks left after 1955. A community of 5 centuries ended in a night. Rural Turks arrived by the millions seeking work. The city that had shrunk now exploded. Istanbul became a megacity before anyone had named the phenomenon. In 1973, a bridge was built across the Bosphorus. For the first time in history, you could walk from Europe to Asia. The strait that had defined the city for 3,000 years was now bridged. The world was smaller. The city was larger. Today, Istanbul is the largest city in Europe. 16 million people, 2 continents, 1 city, 3 bridges span the Bosphorus now. Every morning, millions cross from one continent to another as a daily commute. The ferry still crosses the Golden Horn every 15 minutes. The commute has not changed in 1,000 years. The Grand Bazaar still operates. 500 years of continuous commerce. The craftsmen still work with their hands in the old quarter. Hagia Sophia was reconsecrated as a mosque in 2020. The mosaics are now covered during prayer. For the 4th time in its history, the building changed its allegiance. The dome itself changed nothing. The ecumenical patriarch of Orthodox Christianity still resides in Istanbul, a congregation of a few dozen in a building that once spoke to the world. The Theodosian Walls are 1,500 years old. They are still standing. You can put your hand on the same stones that turned back Attila, the Avars, the Arabs. The city is in permanent negotiation with itself. History is not preserved here. It is simply present. In the foundations of houses, in the stones of steps. The fishermen of the Galata Bridge. Every morning, every evening, 3,000 years of fishing in one spot. At night, the city still glows, still visible from the sea, still its own kind of light. The cuisine of Istanbul contains all its histories: Byzantine, Ottoman, Greek, Armenian, Jewish, all still present on the same street. 400 ships pass through the Bosphorus every day, more traffic than the Panama and Suez canals combined. The children of Istanbul play in the ruins of empires without knowing what they are. The city has not stopped shaking. Istanbul sits on a major fault line. It rebuilds, as it has always rebuilt. The city still argues with itself about religion and secularism, about East and West, about memory and progress. It is still the city between two worlds. The layers of civilization are visible from the air. Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Ottoman, Turkish, each claiming the same stone. The dome of Hagia Sophia still floats above the city, 15 centuries of light. The Strait has never been owned, it has only been crossed. Istanbul does not end, it continues. Every civilization believes it is the last, that what it builds will stand forever. The Greeks who built this city are gone. The Romans who rebuilt it are gone. The Byzantines who loved it more than life are gone. The Ottomans who transformed it into the capital of the world are gone. But the city is still here. The Strait is still here. The water that Bezos sailed on, that Constantine's ships guarded, that Mehmed's fleet was dragged across, it still moves. It still separates. It still connects. Of all the cities humanity has ever built, perhaps none has sat at a more consequential crossroads. None has been desired more, fought over more, built and rebuilt more times. The dome still floats. The Strait still flows. The call to prayer still rises at dawn over a city that has outlasted everyone who ever claimed it. Istanbul, Constantinople, Byzantium, the city that never ended. Every city we cover has a story that nobody taught you in school. If you want more, subscribe, hit the bell. You won't miss the next one. And if this video stayed with you, leave a like. It takes 1 second, and it means more than you think. The next city is already waiting. See you there.